We are back. It's time to track security innovation. So this is where we talk about the startups and we look at the exits, the innovations, we look at the people that are acquired, we look at the funding rounds. It's that chance to talk about innovation, but specifically as it matters to us in the world of security. And as a perfect update for that, let me tell you about what my friend has been working on. For a long time, when we were more of a startup security program and we talked about our own journeys, Paul said, there's good stuff coming, there's good stuff coming, there's good stuff coming. And I'm excited to tell you that there is, because as a lot of us know, a determined attacker, they're going to get through your system. And if you were listening to the last couple conversations, you're right, the breach isn't necessarily the problem. It's really a function of how well you respond or how you respond. And when we're looking at that actually then means you have to know that somebody got through. You've got to know. So the more time somebody stays on your network, right, we call the dwell time, the bigger the problem that you have. So what's interesting is if you think that the way to solve that is to go get staff that are trained, you ramp them up, that's going to take thousands of dollars. It's going to take you months, and then you got to go figure it out and then do something with it. There's now a solution. This is what you've been waiting for. Active Countermeasures AI Hunter enables even the junior analyst to detect the most advanced backdoors, and you can do it in hours instead of days or weeks or months. You can get your demos now, and you know on this program, of course, we love demos. So you can check out the demo if you visit activecountermeasures.com/BSW. And this makes every one of your analysts a hunter, and it gets you to stop being reactive, start being proactive. So, Paul, this is the long-awaited update.
It is.
So what's up?
Well,
Sounds
I mean,
exciting.
You can also go to that link and, you can just buy it too, which, I strongly...
No demo necessary.
Yeah,
just
I strongly
take my money.
Yeah,
I've been waiting for this. I've been in line. Take my money.
Yeah, so there is a video, kind of an explainer video that John Strand did on that page. So, of course, a couple of exciting updates. One is that we've changed the name from Offensive Countermeasures to Active Countermeasures. The other big announcement, and these all kind of tie together, right, is we actually have shipping product now that you can demo and or purchase right from the website, which is fantastic. And in order to get that done, we had to acquire some help. And I'm still kind of in a euphoric state about the person that we've hired to come on the team, and that's Chris Brenton. And the reason for that is Chris is one of my teachers. Back in the day, I took his SANS class, and not only great technical knowledge, but just great like coaching in your career style advice. Like he did stuff, and I was like, that's like the kind of person I want to be. And when he agreed to come on and effectively, be the like chief operations person, because John and I don't have a whole lot of spare time. We needed someone to step in and handle the day-to-day stuff. And that person being Chris, he just understands the development process. The things that he says, like, yes, that's what I think. That's what I talk about. That's what I've seen other people do very successfully. He is on point with that stuff. So having Chris on board has been just absolutely fantastic. Many of the things we talk about in the show, Chris is like, so we're going to do it this way. I'm like, yeah, dude, that was like episode whatever. I'm like, you don't have to explain yourself. I'm on board. I got it. That's great. So it's nice, is an understatement. It's nice having someone like Chris on board to do some of that stuff. How about the name
change? Was that a struggle, or was that you guys sat around and said, yeah, we need to pick a different name?
It was interesting. If choosing a name for anything is a humorous process, a laborious process. We always make the joke that I suck at naming stuff because of the trademark dispute that's happened. I've named some things pretty poorly in the past, and sometimes I get it right. I think we just wanted something a little more kind of more widespread adoption and not pigeonholing us into something that speaks more towards like active defense, right? And so it is about active defense, but we just thought Active Countermeasures was a much better fit for what we're doing today. So.
Well, I'll tell you, not that it's not that my vote matters, but the word active is fantastic, right? I can see where the word offensive used in the proper context makes a lot of sense, and I can see how somebody out of context goes, "What? Why would I want to be offensive?" Right. But as soon as you say active is great, because who the hell wants to be static? Nobody does, right?
Well,
you're static, you're dying slowly.
And there's some that say, well, every defensive measure is active in some way, but there's varying degrees, I think. So
yeah, look, I like it. So congratulations.
Thank you.
I'm excited, and I look forward to more good things happening from it.
In my talk at InfoSec World, I will be talking about our open source version of it called Rita. which you can install on the Security Onion and provide some great insights. So I've actually been able to spend some time to compare what's available in open source for general analysis of your traffic and security events, and kind of compare that to even what we have open source. And it's nice. I feel like it really does have a place and really fits. And I of course have been exposed to the technology for a while, and I'm like, I want to analyze the traffic this way. And our open source project Rita allows you to do that. Of course, AI Hunter is the commercial version of that product, which adds on, a lot more features. And that was a decision we talked about on the show that we're sticking with. There'll be an open source version and a commercial version. So you can find the open source version, or you can go to activecountermeasures.com/BSW, find a great video and demo and or purchase the product for the first time ever. So it's exciting.
That's fantastic. I'm excited for you, Paul. That's I always like it when those journeys work out, and I love the model that you're putting at. All right, so we've been teasing everybody around popcorn and sinks and bears
and breast milk.
And breast milk.
We'll get to that.
Where do you want to start? Do you want to start with breast milk? I feel like we should start there.
We can start with breast milk. What's interesting is this was not a target market, and I had heard of women who were selling their breast milk, and of course, one of the major objections you have to overcome, when you sell anything, there's going to be objections to people who are brought up by people who are potential clients. And for me, the health risks, I'm sure, right, that's on your mind, Michael, is like, what are the health risks of giving your baby someone else's breast milk? Like, obviously, that's a concern. So there is a level of testing. I'm kind of uncertain how you validate, being the security person, right? Like, how do I validate that level of testing has been done? So I think that's an interesting aspect to this kind of business model. And then I looked at the target market. The target market is men with fetishes and bodybuilders. Like, those are two target markets that I had not considered before. Certainly the men with fetishes, like, that's just super, super weird. And if you can get over that and have a business around that, all the more power to you. Bodybuilders, I had not considered that it was something that was consumed by bodybuilders, I guess, for its nutritional value in bodybuilding. And she says it's addictive, which is kind of strange. Making money is kind of addictive, I guess. So, props to you there if you can overcome. And sometimes she does say that, like, the creepiness factor is way too high, and she's kind of learned to weed some of that stuff out. But she's making a pretty good living doing, selling her breast milk, which is not a business that I had considered. I had heard of people doing it before, but this individual is very successful at it and found some interesting target markets. Now, we would say one target market, right? She's found two, but I thought that was a very interesting take on the, finding your target market.
I can only imagine what that target profile interview was like.
Right?
and working through the 7 bags of the brain audit on that.
Right, yeah, that would be an interesting experience to see. What some of those interviews look like.
It kind of goes back to your point, and so let's spin a different innovative twist on it. A lot of people that watch this program have talked to us off camera, sometimes in person, sometimes by email, and they've asked for advice on careers and stuff. And for some of you that are waiting on it, we're planning those segments, and we're trying to do a much better job of that and fit it all in. Some of you have asked some questions around problems and the value prop scorecard and those things, and I promise you those are all coming. But then some of you have said, hey, we want to do our side hustle. Yep, got a segment on that coming. But there's always an opportunity, right? It really comes down to, do you have the ability to help someone else solve a problem in a way that creates value? And that's going to come down to then understanding the problems that someone else has. And then, of course, making sure that you're comfortable with it from an ethics or morality or just general whatever perspective. But if you are, there's a lot of opportunities. And I think that that's going to continue to exist in security. I think if you take the 2 interviews that we did on today's program and you look at some of the interviews that we've done even recently, we are awash in opportunity. This is why I love the fact that we try to take an optimistic approach to it. I think I'm with Thornton. I think it's a great time to be in security. I think people have never been more interested. And I think the innovation, although at times it feels overwhelming, is absolutely fantastic. And so stories like this show us that no matter your situation or where you're at, there's always a time. Doesn't matter how old you are, doesn't matter how young you are, but it's going to come down to can you help someone else solve that problem in a way that creates value for them? Mm-hmm. Yeah, cool. You're onto it. It's really cool. All right, so there's only 3 updates this week. It's been kind of a light week, and I think, Paul, we're in that what I call that quiet period, that run up to RSA.
I was just saying the same thing on Enterprise Security Weekly, Michael. And it's funny, and I'm interested in your take on this too. And it was our advice to other companies that when you're in this quiet period happens just before RSA and just before Black Hat, where everyone holds back their announcements because they want to make them at the major conference. I think to a certain degree, it's a mistake, and you get lost in the noise. I'd like to see a trend, like we've done at Active Countermeasures. We made our announcement pre-RSA because no one else is really making an announcement. And I think there's some merit to that, because what's going to happen is RSA is going to come in the lead up to that week. There's going to be a lot of announcements. That during that week, there's going to be a lot of announcements. And post RSA, there's going to be so those announcements are spread over 3 weeks. And every security company, most security companies are making announcements during that time. There's a percentage that we in this network, I can tell you right now, we're just not going to have a chance to cover because they're happening
we're
all
going to
at
ignore
once,
most of them.
right?
Yeah. And let's go a step further while we're on it. They're all milk toast. They all, and so what that means is they're all telling me the exact same thing. Yep. They're all the market leader, solving the exact same problem, using machine learning and AI, using big data differently. Yep. But stop. So no, I'm with you, Paul. In fact, I think you and I have talked about this a lot off camera. But because it's kind of a light week, here's the thing, folks. If you're trying to stand out at one of these conferences and you feel like these conferences are the tax, right? The people joke off camera all the time about the Gartner tax. So if you work for Gartner and you don't like me, terribly sorry. But a lot of companies feel like they've got to pay Gartner in order to get included in a Magic Quadrant or to get included in something. And it's a tax. It's a way of doing business. A lot of companies feel like they've got to pay for an analyst house, Gartner or some others, because that's how they cover their asses. And they don't have to make bad decisions. By the way, that's coming up. We're working on here some ways to better understand friction. And if you're engaging in that a lot, you've got a lot of friction. That said, if you could come on and you tell us about something in advance, because Michael, Paul, I've got to be at RSA, I've got to be at Black Hat, I've got to be at these things. Okay, then how are you separating yourselves out? And if you're saying the same thing as everybody else, but come see us at the booth. Oh, stop. But this is a great run right now. Talk about it. Talk about the problem. Convince people that you understand it. Give us a different way to look at the problem and paint me, right? You heard me already say today, that picture of that better tomorrow, and save for the how can I get there to come talk with you. If somebody actually has that problem, that's going to be something we're going to talk about next week's segment. But if somebody actually has that problem, they're the ones you want to talk to. You don't want to, it's this whole, I'll just cast a wide net and I want to talk to everybody. They're not your market. Especially if you're a startup, you want to talk to people who have that problem. If you have that problem and you've fallen in love with that problem in the weeks leading up to RSA, then you can say, hey, by the way, if you've got this problem and you're looking for this type of a solution, we're looking to talk with you. It's a much better use of time for everybody. If you try to time it to be in the middle of the noise, I don't know how the hell you rise above it. I think it all gets washed out. It's telling me that you're the filet mignon on a buffet and you're hoping everybody will figure it out. Good luck. They won't.
And I've talked to security companies that have $100 million in revenue, and they're like, look, everyone knows our brand, or the perception is that we don't have a brand awareness problem. Okay, sure. And they said, we can go to a conference and be successful, and we have good strategies. However, the problem isn't even I can get people to come to my booth. I can get people to come to my booth. The problem they have is, how do I identify my target market quickly from those people that have coming to my booth? And that's a problem that even when you're a startup, you may not know you have, but you have it. You may have those other problems too, which are taking center stage. But when your revenue is $100 million and you're showing up at a major trade show, you got this problem. And I don't know that I have a great way to address that problem. How do you differentiate people and funnel your target market, weed out or filter it, at a trade show booth? That's really
falling
hard.
in love with the problem. That's how, right? It's the way that we've done it, because we're so imprecise about it, Paul, is I try to have, right? So thankfully we've gotten rid of booth babes, but we have to try to do something that's outlandish. We try to do some sort of a giveaway, or we try to have some sort of a tchotchke. We also flood it. I mean, the thing I don't think people necessarily realize. Now, obviously, if you're in this side of it, you get this, and you're nodding your head right now. But there's the cost of the booth space. It's called airlift. It's the cost of getting everything to the booth. And as Paul, you can't just walk it in yourself. Like, you've got to pay the dockage fee, then you've got to pay the transport fee, then you've got to pay the fee for someone else to set some of the stuff up for you, but not all of it. You're paying for power sometimes. You're paying for the internet connection, whether you want wired or wireless. So you've got all those fees into it. Oh, and then you've got to staff the booth. And then you've got to follow up with all those leads that you're getting and all those other types of things. And so when you're putting out $1 and $2 and $5 tchotchkes, or you've got the cheap shit up on top, but all the better stuff underneath for the person you're really talking to, you and I know this when we go walk the floor together, and we simply say, so cool, what problem do you solve? Well, it depends. No, actually, no, it doesn't. And the thing that I took out of our interview with Sean D'Souza is he said, look, there's no wrong problem. There's no right problem. There's probably 10 or 15 problems that you solve. So the trick is either connecting your uniqueness to the problem. That was wildly beneficial for me. Or you go figure out the problem that your target profile has. So if you're one of these organizations, the simplest thing is you go focus on the problem. I see everybody lead out with solutions. I see everybody lead out with this is what we do. Nobody cares what you do. They care about themselves. So if you go talk about, do you have this problem? And then it proved to me that you understand it, because we always talk about isolating it. And one of the questions that came in from Chris this week was, well, how do I define the problem properly? Yep. I promise you that's coming.
Yeah.
I would say segment on that based on where I'm at in some of the stuff I'm creating around it. Maybe April, probably May, because I want to get it right. And Fred has asked us too, like, okay, give us an example of getting it right. Yep, probably either in the same segment, or we'll do like a couple segments on those types of issues. But here's the thing then. Talk to me about the problem. Talk to me about the consequences, and talk to me about solutions, not your solution, just solutions. But when you do that, give me the lens, give me the language. Because what if we also heard from our interviews today? I know that the executives, the other people at my organization are going to say to me, what'd you learn at RSA? And if you go, well, it all sucks, then they're not really thrilled with you. Well, I don't know. There's too many companies. Everybody wants my dollars. Oh, stop with that too. So the way that you sort it out is based on the problem. If you've done a good job at defining your problem, and there's 30,000 attendees and 90% bypass you, some people look at that and go, see, we failed. Hell no, man. That 10% that showed up, that came by, and they go, hey, I like that. Tell me more. The ones who pulled that literature and said, whoa, I like this. You've got them. You're not going to sell anybody on the show floor. No. And I know somebody out there is telling me, oh, no, I did this one time. And how big was that fish when you caught it? So, the thing is, sell them on the problem and sell them on the consequences of the problem. And the people who have that problem and resonate with those consequences, they're interested in the solution. And if you can show them there's a pathway, what you've done is you've given them enough. Like, what I love about your approach with active countermeasures is, look, here's an open source tool. You can go try it out. Yeah, and I think they're going to find that it works, and it's got some really cool insights. And what you're showing them is, by the way, if you work on our commercial side, I can do this and this and this for you. Yeah, you can do it, but I figured out how to do it better and faster and cheaper. And that's a great investment for somebody. I like that approach.
What you maybe just realize, Michael, is that when you're selling at a trade show floor, if you lead in with the problem and you can make people fall in love with the problem, you don't have to sell them right then and there. I think in people's brains, if you nailed your problem statement, which is a whole art and science in and of itself, that when they have that problem, they will think of you. If you can get it down to that level and make people fall in love with the problem, even though they might say, well, I don't think I really have that problem today. I agree. I love your problem statement. I love the problem that you solved, but I don't think I have it. Inevitably, what's going to happen, they're going to go back to their jobs, and maybe a week or two later, they're going to be like, oh, shit, I have this problem. They're going to remember you. They're not going to remember you because you talked about your solution and you gave away some kind of tchotchke or you did a booth presentation. Like, all that stuff doesn't matter. You make them fall in love with the problem. When you have that problem, think of all the products that you've been exposed to in your own life as a consumer. When you have that problem, if you can think of that solution, you're going to go buy it, right?
That's exactly what it is. It's the way I look at it is I want to fall in love with the problem publicly so that other people start to see it. And if you've done it right, when they have it, see, this is the thing. I don't want to make anybody suddenly do something. I want, for me in my business, right, we look at overcoming friction and translating value. When somebody comes to me and they say, Michael, we have that problem, and these are my consequences. Wait, so what would it be like to work with you? We have a much different conversation. I don't have to convince anybody. I want the people that are experiencing it. Same as what you're trying to do with active countermeasures and any of whether there are partners or not. If you can help me better understand the problem, Because what's the other thing we know? A lot of people don't even realize that they have that problem. How do you convince them that they have the problem? You don't. You fall in love with the problem. You give them the language. You give them the things to look for. You give them an understanding of the consequences. Then they're back at work and they see some of those consequences and they go, huh, maybe I do have that problem. Tell me more. If you can educate people that way, then you're the authority. And now they realize that they have that problem, but the good news is they also know there's a solution to it. It's not intractable. So now they're willing to give it some attention. In fact, if you look at the brain science behind it, that's why I'm a big fan of isolating it down and asking questions. You get that right. You get the consequences right. We're locked in. Now I got to figure it out. Now I got to see if you're going to work for me. That's why the value prop and the stuff we're going to talk about next week gets into that third part, that impact, and we'll take a look at that. So it's exactly where those opportunities come in. And it's exciting stuff. And when you guys are out, so you're going to be at InfoSec World in a couple of weeks. And then we've got RSA coming up after that. What we're going to try to do is I'm going to give everybody some opportunities to figure out how to score some of this type of stuff better. I want the feedback. And I want people to, if they're at the show floor, Paul, I want them to come by and talk to you and talk about what they see as the promising ones, the people that are getting it right. I have no problems. Obviously, we'll collaborate on this, but people that are getting it right, I want to showcase that because that's our pathway forward. It's not trying to use these complex terms that absolutely say nothing. It's getting down to the heart of what's wrong. But as you pointed out, getting your problem statement right, it's an art and a science. And all I'm going to say for now is it's something I'm actively working on. So need a couple weeks, but I'm recognized as fascinating, Paul. My straight talk journey has been so much that I've learned, so much that I'm updating for people. But it's really come down to a lot of times if you can't get that first question right, the rest of it doesn't really matter. Yep. And so we got to spend some time on it. All right, so some updates. KnowBe4 acquired Popcorn Training undisclosed. Didn't look like Popcorn had any funding.
Your bears and sinks and Popcorn now. That was good. I liked it.
Yeah, it's so here's what I think is interesting. What we've seen so far with most of the people that are making acquisitions. So Wombat got acquired. I apologize to everybody, but I forgot the other one. And we see all these private equity firms now are buying things that are going after the SMB mid-market play, and they're rolling in anything that can do some sort of automated or on-demand training or what have you. Now, we know KnowBe4 got around last year because we publicly talked about that and celebrated it. So what I think is interesting here is that if you go in and you take a look at it, they said, look, Popcorn's going to still run independent in South Africa. And by the way, we added a bunch of new titles to our training library really fast. And so this works out for everybody. What I'm kind of seeing here, and I haven't had a chance to talk to anybody at KnowBe4 yet, but it almost seems like what they're trying to do now is broaden their reach out faster, which either makes them a better takeover target, or they might actually try to be that one company that doesn't get acquired and start to talk about how they own the global marketplace. So to me, this is kind of interesting. It's an interesting thing, but we talk about whether the round should be disclosed or undisclosed. When you've got a funded company buying up another company in the same space from a different country where their products tend to align, it looks like Popcorn hadn't taken on any funding from Crunchbase or Owler that I could tell. That undisclosed is not terribly surprising. It's almost like hey, we do better if we work together. Here's a pile of cash. Now you're part of us. Let's go make some stuff together.
I do very much like the name though. I think it kind of speaks to like the mission here at Security Weekly. IT Pro TV as well has their new kind of swag things like Popcorn, and binge worthy. I think actually I know that the messaging, which I think is pretty powerful, is that you don't have to be bored with your training, that you can be, the thing in your brain when you think TV and popcorn is that you're relaxed, you're entertained, and that's how they're spinning the training. And I think IT Pro TV accomplishes that. I know they've been using popcorn in some of their Twitter postings, and they've got the little tchotchke things. I think that's great. That sends a great message. It kind of goes back to our trade show thing too. I think a lot of people give stuff away. It's very rarely aligned with their messaging. And in IT Pro TV's case, it is aligned with their messaging. And now here's a whole company that's called Popcorn Training. I think it's a great name. We also talk about naming stuff too. I think that's a great name.
Yeah. So then also smart strategy to let them kind of continue to operate. All right. So I'm going to skip on these because there was a Series A, but it's actually an area that I think, based on your talk coming up, I kind of want some of your takes on what happened with Snyk. So let's talk about the bear. McAfee acquired TunnelBear for an undisclosed amount. Now, from what I could tell, TunnelBear hadn't raised any money, so I'm not terribly surprised. keep in mind, McAfee right now, big time owned private equity, billions of dollars at stake here. They spun off from Intel. Intel still has a pretty large stake in them. So we've been kind of like, that's interesting to see what they do. Now, what's interesting here is TunnelBear, I'm going off memory. They're in Canada. I want to say they're Toronto. If not, it's Montreal. So the East Coast Canada. And they said, look, we're still the full team. So what's interesting about this is it's that acquisition / acqui-hire. They're keeping the team together. They're keeping the team in Canada, and they're going to let them run as an independent organization for a while. And there was something interesting in their update that said, we did a full audit, full disclosure last year, and we learned a lot in the process. And so oddly to me, it made sense. Like you partner up with the McAfee, and now they're going to help with that stuff. And so they said, look, we're still going to try to do the Canadian privacy laws, but by the way, we're now owned by a U.S. company. We're still headquartered in Canada for our piece of it, and we're going to keep developing. We're going to keep working. We're going to keep learning. We're going to keep being transparent. We talked during our interviews today. Transparency is key. I think this is interesting, and I think looking at companies now that are going to go after that mid-market and that SMB space. So what are we seeing? I'm going to give you the way to do VPNs easier, because let's be fair. VPNs are a real pain in the ass. They're great, but I haven't found anybody make them easy yet. And we're starting to see that heat up. And in fact, there was a recent acquisition a couple weeks ago where they actually acquired the company because they wanted their defunct VPN product. They didn't care about the rest of it. So guys, if you're into automated training, if you're into automation, if you're into VPNs, but what we're seeing is it's all about convenience for the users and bundling it all up into packages. That's the trend as I'm seeing it. And so, good, bad, and different, it's probably good for TunnelBear. It's better than going away or not figuring out your money. They got acquired. They've got jobs. They're going to keep doing something that they seem pretty passionate about with a company that's pretty hell-bent on making a dent. So, I don't know. It seems like a good option for everybody. I'll just be curious to see where it pokes its head up. Where the bear pokes its head out. The
big issue with this market, and it's one that we've had sponsors, a sponsor in this space in the past, and I really want to get another VPN company on specifically the Secure Digital Life program that addresses this issue. The problem comes down to trust, and I can't find one that someone hasn't said something bad about, and whether that's justified or not remains to be seen. But there's a lot of trust issues with in this case, the kind of what I call a private VPN provider, right? You're not linking a tunnel from the user back to your corporate headquarters, although some of those companies have diversified and have corporate solutions for that. But typically you're looking at this from a privacy perspective, which is probably why they're based in Canada for some of those issues. But I think there's like 3 issues, right, with trust. Is my data really being encrypted all the time? Is there information, if it is encrypted, is there information that's leaking about me and leaking some of my information, even if that's in a cookie, my real IP address, for example, or my DNS requests? So some technical things, but basically, is it leaking? And then the third one is, are they going to tell on me? Like if someone issues a warrant to them, right? Are they going to tell on me? And that comes into like how they keep logs.
So that's interesting. So when I look at that explains their whole drive behind our audit, our transparency, right, our public release of it. It's really looking at that trust. Yep. And that, to be fair, this is a lot of the challenges 20 years ago of doing a global PKI. On paper, it looks great. As soon as you get down to, okay, but who runs it? Who's got the authoritative certificate? You're like, sure. There's this little challenge. Yep. All right. So last one, Snyk. $7 million Series A.
I read it as Snyk.
Oh, Snyk. Oh yeah, you're right. I keep reading it as Snyk, and apparently I have mild dyslexia. You're right. It's Snyk. Snyk. Sneakio.
I like Sync. Actually works well for me too. I like that.
Yeah. So apparently I got that wrong. Well, there goes my whole joke for the day. But so here's the thing, Paul. I couldn't find them on Crunchbase. I couldn't find them on Owler. The UK-based company. They claim that their total funding now is at $10 million, and then what they're going to do with this Series A raise. So a $7 million A, I mean, that's a big A, but based on what we learned from Will Lin, it's in the range of it. And they said, okay, so here's our deal. We're going to take the money, and we're going to do new developments. And I was like, wait, that's not really what you do with an A. But then in the last paragraph, they said, look, we're overwhelmed with demand. We can't keep up with it. This new funding is going to help us keep up with that type of a demand. Okay, cool. I like all that. But when I go to their website, they talk about the fact that Snyk helps you use open source and stay secure. Continuously find and fix vulnerabilities in your dependencies. It's not asked as a question, but that kind of makes sense to me. All right, so if I'm using open source, I want to stay secure, and vulnerabilities are largely going to be in dependencies, based on my limited knowledge of it. I kind of dug that. So their website is busy, but I didn't think it was horrible. $7 million open source. So you're looking at open source stuff right now for your talk in InfoSec world. Thoughts? I mean, is this a good raise for them? Is this a good service? Are we like? I don't know how to process this one, Paul.
Players in this space tend to do the. I'll refrain from the colorful analogies, but they tend to promote how extensive their vulnerability check database is. In other words, if you've got a code repository, you're developing your own software or working with open source software in conjunction with developing your own, they can drop in their code and tell you in your build process, ideally before you make a commit, that you're linking or including a library that has a published vulnerability. So the selling point for many of these companies, Black Duck was one of them before they got acquired. You know, they're acquired now. There's several others. Flexera, I think, plays in this space too. They're all kind of touting the size of their database, right? I'm not sure. I mean, being in
but it's not the size that matters, right? It's how you use it.
Like having been in vulnerability management, while that is one factor, it's certainly not everything. So it'll be interesting to see how the space shakes out, given there's already been some acquisitions. I think, likely the logical acquirers of this technology are vulnerability management companies or others in web application security as a complement to their already existing offering of maybe static or dynamic code analysis on the web application front. Of course, this delves outside of web application. This is sheer all kinds of development, right? I mean, they're supporting languages like Go and Ruby and things like that. So we'll see.
So the other option we're going to start seeing too is that this is going to start making its way into more of these DevOps tools, whether security is involved or not, and it becomes a check earlier in the process.
And many of them do target not even security, but they're just targeting developers to make sure that they're putting out code that doesn't have any kind of vulnerabilities and that's more resilient, like we talked about earlier.
As I see it, and it's kind of like we've talked about with both of our interviews today, it's not that developers aren't interested in security or don't even know it. It's that they've got a job that they're getting paid for. They've got milestones and deadlines that they've got to hit. So the question is, do we make security more complex for them or do we make it so it's just part of the routine and they have tools that work for them in order to get these things done? It's part of the process. It's fast. They're not waiting on security. Security is not bottlenecking it, but we still get some access to it. I like those approaches.
And similar to TunnelBear, this company, Snyk, whatever it's called, publishes their database. So you can go right on their website and look at their database, and then you can even go test your code. They have an option to go test your code.
So it's a good way to get it figured out.
That's how many of these companies are messaging and positioning is you can find the most vulnerabilities with our solution.
Yeah, and I'm kind of curious your take on this, and then we'll go ahead and wrap up what's been a phenomenal program, at least from where I sit. I like the idea of giving people demos.
Yes,
but I also still feel like if a company is doing that as a way to avoid having to tell me a story, doesn't it feel like they're kind of putting it back on me? Like, hey, get a free account. You'll see if it works for you or not. Like the companies that at least say, here, let me give you an example. Let me show you how to use it. Let me give you the common test cases. Let me on-ramp you into it. Let me keep selling you the problem and show you how we're helping you. I think they do a lot better. Oh,
for sure. And that's interesting, Michael, because that's exactly what I'm realizing is missing from many of these open source projects is you get a great high-level overview. You can go download it and install it. And you get some help maybe with some installation instructions. And then you get an example. And the example is usually like the most technically cool whiz-bang thing. I can go find this awesome, really esoteric condition in my environment by running this super awesome query, right? But everything else in between, all those things you just mentioned, can you say those again? Because I need to put it in a slide. All those things you just mentioned are like you have to figure it out on your own. And which, I mean, is one of the natures of open source. And I think that's where some of the disconnect is.
Yeah, and so therefore some of our opportunity, which is odd because it's going to come back down to how we communicate and how we help people do this type of stuff better. So as always, my friend, it's a blast. I enjoy these conversations. Great interviews, more planned. You can catch him at Security Weekly on Twitter. I'm at Catalyst Let us know what you thought. Leave the bad dad jokes out of it, because I know I didn't hit this one too well. You can also find us on LinkedIn. Let us know what you thought of the show. Segments you want, we both respond, and we're planning to them. So you know what? Maybe next week I'll try to like give up a list of some of the segments that we're working on. And frankly, we're trying to put some thought into them. So maybe one a month is about what we can do. But we'll see you next week, 1 p.m. Eastern, live on Facebook and YouTube. Have a great week and be safe out there.